Over the weekend, I was catching up on some films I haven't seen in a while, or haven't seen at all. While I feel there are some great films being released every year, and some great films released right now, I sometimes find myself longing to look back at some of those lost gems that maybe don't get talked about as much, but deserve to be seen. Don't Go in the House from 1979 is one of those films. Let me tell you why. Welcome back to ML Miller Frights. I'm ML Miller. Before we begin, please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. Don't Go in the House, aka The Burning Man, The Burning, Pyromaniac, Maniac 2, and Burning Death of Horror was made in 1979 and released on March 28, 1980. You can find it streaming on Tubi. It's directed by Joseph Ellison and written by Joe Masefield, Joseph Ellison, and Ellen Hammill. A very damaged man named Donnie, played by Dan Grimaldi, who was burned as a child by his abusive mother, comes home from work one day to find her dead in her bedroom, but refuses to accept that she's passed. Listening to voices in his head, Donnie believes he now has the freedom to be or do whatever he wants. So he decides to build a makeshift burn room, buys a flamethrower and fire retardant suit, begins luring young women back to his home to burn them alive, and adds them to his collection of charbroiled corpses that he keeps in the second floor of his house. As Donnie's sanity crumbles, the crispy bodies pile up. Don't Go in the House is known as a proto-slasher, which means it came along before Halloween and Friday the 13th established the basic blueprint most slasher films will soon adopt for the bulk of the 80s and 90s. It doesn't have a final girl and focuses more on the slasher than really giving any of the victims much character development. I don't know for sure, but this looks to be one of the first and only films where the serial killer is a serial arsonist. I guess spontaneous combustion kind of fits in there too. At first, Don't Go in the House starts out as a Psycho ripoff, with the mama's boy cracking once his abusive mother has passed. But this one goes a bit further by not keeping this info from the viewers for the entire movie. We see the mother is dead, we know that Donnie is pretty damaged, and though the film has a Maniac-style way of having the killer's victims sitting around the house and interacting with him, Don't Go in the House was released before Joe Spinelli made his iconic film. It also came out the same year Joe D'Amato's Beyond the Darkness was released, which also had the killer conversing and doing other things with his dead mother and luring women back to his place. Once I saw that, this Psycho riff became a lot more interesting to me. Now, Dan Grimaldi is kind of a whiny, sad sack throughout the whole film. He does a lot of come ons when he tries to tempt the girls he meets back to his place. Instead of attracting them to his home, he kind of guilts them in a very Jersey way, making him all the more creepy, but also all the more pathetic. This seems to be intentional, as Donnie lies to his victims, telling them how tough a guy he really is, while highlighting how much they should feel sorry for him. It makes Donnie all the more dislikable, and if there's a complaint I have about Don't Go in the House, it's that it focuses on a very unlikable protagonist the entire way through. While I was intrigued to see how far this weirdo would go, it was somewhat arduous to endure Grimaldi's whiny performance. That said, he does a good job of playing a very damaged soul. Seeing him struggle with his sanity in a house full of corpses who criticize and laugh at him makes you kind of feel sorry for the poor schmuck. With the film being made at the height of disco, of course it has to have a scene taking place in a disco dance club. In a lot of ways, Donnie is a lot like the self-centered Tony Manero character that John Travolta made famous in Saturday Night Fever, with a lot of complaining to his ma. And there's even a scene where Danny goes out shopping so he can look good on the dance floor. These scenes where Danny reflects on the decisions he's made before his real breakdown at the end make for some unintentionally funny moments. At the same time, his attack on one of the girls in the club who is into him is one of the more bizarre and disturbing scenes in the film, as he lights a woman's head on fire on the dance floor with a candle.
Aside from the disco duck scene, the music is actually a strong part of what makes the film so creepy. There are certain sounds that begin to be a part of the soundtrack, like a rotary phone clicking as you dial it, and a woman's scream that echoes in the background as a scene transition. It's a more sophisticated use of sound that one usually sees in this type of lo-fi slasher. The effects are rock solid. Of course, using fire in a movie is usually out of the question or reserved for quick shots in most horror films of this type, mainly because slashers are pretty low-budget fare. But while the fire is usually done in POV shots and the victims are burned off camera, the effects of the charred corpses Donnie keeps are astoundingly good. They are crispy and stiff, with sizzled hair and dressed in his mother's finest dresses. Seeing them all sitting together in a little room is quite disturbing. Donnie is also haunted by his mother's ghost, who he sees in the periphery, schlepping around the house. Mother is not burned, but the way her skin browns and decays is also done quite well, making her just as horrifying. One can only imagine how bad the house stunk with all of that burned and rotting carrion all around. This is one twisted movie. Well, it takes its time to get going, as much of the beginning establishes Donnie as an outcast at work and focuses on his abusive past and the death of his mother. It really doesn't start popping until after the first half hour. But once the flaming ball gets rolling, it's quite fascinating to see Donnie get himself deeper and deeper into trouble. Don't Go in the House is definitely worth seeking out. It earned a coveted video nasty and was edited heavily back in the day, and I think I might have seen the edited version on Tubi, so I'm eager to seek this one out to see an uncut version, which is said to have more scenes of burning corpses and a bit more nudity. Don't Go in the House is a surprisingly diabolical little film, and I'm shocked it eluded me for so long. How about you? Have you seen Don't Go in the House? Let me know your thoughts on this creepy little flick down in the comments.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside